I'm up in the Kirkland office today, up here for an offsite, a little bit of planning, and they said, you know what, why don't we see if we can throw together a video in like 10 minutes or less? So we said, all right, let's give it a shot. So we're thinking about some of the common things that you do with the Webmaster console, or some topics that webmasters want to hear about. People like to go to the Webmaster console and check their backlinks. They also like to find out if they have any penalties. There's a lot of really good stats in the Webmaster console. But one thing that I've been hearing some questions about is, how do I remove my URLs from Google? So why would you want to do this? Well, suppose you're a school and you accidentally left up social security numbers of all your students up on the web. Or you're a store and you left up credit card numbers. Or maybe you run a forum and suddenly you've gotten spammed by Ukrainian porn spammers, which happened to a friend of mine recently. So whatever the reason, you want to get some URLs out of Google instead of getting URLs into Google. Well, let's look at some of the possible approaches, some of the different ways you can do it. And what I'll do is I'll talk through each one of these and kind of draw a happy face by one or two that I think are especially good as far as getting the content out of Google or preventing it from getting into Google in the first place. So the first thing that a lot of people say is, okay, I just won't link to a page. It'll be my secret server page. Google will never find it. That way I don't have to worry about it showing up in the search engine. This is not a great approach, and I'll give you a very simple reason why. We actually see so many people surf to a page and then surf to another web server, and that causes your browser to have a refer in the HTTP browser codes, the header status, so that the page you were at before shows up to that other web server. Now, if that other web server says, oh, these are the top refers to my page, and maybe that's a clickable hyperlink, then Google can crawl that other web server and find a link to your so-called secret page. So it's very weak to try to say, oh, you know what? I'm just not going to link to it. I'll keep it a secret. Nobody will ever find out about it. Because for whatever reason, somebody will somebody will surf from that page and have the referrer set, or somebody will accidentally link to that page. And you know, if there's a link on the web to that page, there's a reasonable chance we might find it. So I don't recommend using that. It's a relatively weak way. Now, another way you can do is something called Htaccess. All right, so that sounds scary, but let me just tell you very simply. This is a very simple file that lets you do things like redirect from one URL to another URL. The thing that I'm specifically talking about is you can password protect a subdirectory or even your entire site. Now, I don't think we provide an Htaccess tool in the Webmaster console, but that's okay. There's a lot of them out on the web. And if you just search for something like Htaccess, tool or wizard or something like that, you'll find ones where you can say, oh, I'd like to password protect a directory. And you can even tell it the directory and it'll generate one for you. And then you can just copy and paste that into your website. So this is very good. Why is this strong? Why am I going to draw a happy face here? Well, if you've got a password on that directory, Googlebot's not going to guess that password, and so we're not going to be able to crawl that directory at all. And if we can't get to it, it will never show up in our index. This is very strong, it's very robust, it'll work for every search engine because someone has to know the password to get into that directory. So this is one of the two ways that I really, really recommend. It's a preventative measure, so it's not good if it's already had Google get into a particular area of your site. But if you're planning ahead and you know what the sensitive areas are going to be, just slap a password on there and it'll work really well. All right, so here's another way, one that a lot of people know about. It's called robots.txt. The standard has been around for over a decade, since at least 2006. And essentially it's like an electronic no trespassing sign. It says, here are areas of your site that Google or other search engines are not allowed to crawl. We do provide a robots.txt tool in the Webmaster console. So given a website, you can test out URLs and see whether Googlebot's allowed to get to them. You can test out whether different variants of Googlebot, like the image Googlebot, is allowed to get to it. And you can take out new robots.txt files for a test drive. So you can say, okay, suppose I try this as my robots.txt. Could you crawl this URL? Could you crawl this URL? And you can just try it out and make sure that it works okay. That's nice because otherwise you might shoot yourself in the foot. Suppose you just make this robots.txt live and it had a syntax error that would let everybody in or keep everybody out. Well, that could cause problems. So I recommend you take that tool out for a test drive, get one that you like, and then you can then put it live. Now, robots.txt is kind of interesting. Different search engines can have slightly different policies about uncrawled URLs. I'll give you a very simple example. Way, way, way back in the day, eBay.com, NY Times, NewYorkTimes.com didn't allow anyone to crawl their site. And so they had a robots.txt that said, user agent star, disallow everybody. Nobody's allowed to crawl this site if you're a well-behaved search engine. So that's kind of problematic, because if you are a search engine and somebody types in eBay and you don't return ebay.com, you look kind of dumb, right? And so what we decided, and what our policy still is that while we won't crawl this page because of robots.txt, we can show an uncrawled reference. And sometimes we can be pretty good about it. For example, if there's an entry for nytimes.com in the Open Directory project, then we can use that snippet from the ODP, and we'll show it with nytimes.com being an uncrawled reference, and it can almost look as good as if we'd crawled it, even though we weren't allowed to crawl it and didn't crawl it. So use robots.txt to prevent crawling, but it won't completely prevent that reference from showing up in Google. So there are other ways to do that. Let's move on to the noindex meta tag. What that essentially says, for Google at least, is don't show my page at all in the search engines. So if we see noindex, we will completely drop it from Google search results. We'll still crawl it, but we won't actually show it in our list of search results if somebody does a query for that page. So that's pretty powerful. It works very well. It's very simple to understand. There are a couple complicating factors. Yahoo and Microsoft, even if you use the noindex meta tag, can still return the reference to that page. They won't return the snippet and stuff like that, but you might see the link. We do see some people having problems with that. For example, if you're a webmaster and you're rolling out a new site, you might put up that noindex meta tag and be shifting around and developing the site, and then you might forget, and you might not take that noindex meta tag down. So a very simple example, the Hungarian, I think, one of the versions of BMW has done this. Ben Harper, who's a musician you've probably heard about for a long time, and maybe I think still does on benharper.net, have a noindex meta tag. So if you're the webmaster for that site, we'd love if you would take that down. So there are various people within Google that have said, well, maybe we should go to this policy where we won't show the full snippet, but maybe we'll just show a reference to that URL. There's one other interesting corner case on noindex, which is we can only abide by that noindex meta tag if we've actually crawled that page. If we haven't crawled that page, we haven't seen the meta tag, so we don't even know it's there. So in theory, it's possible that you link to a page, and we don't get a chance to crawl that page, and so we don't see that there's a noindex, and we don't drop it out completely. So there are a couple cases in which you can at least see the reference show up within Google, and Yahoo and Microsoft, I believe, will pretty much always be willing to return the reference, even if you use the noindex meta tag. So here is another approach that you can use. You can use nofollow on individual links. This is another kind of weak approach, because inevitably you say, okay, there's 20 links to this page, I'm going to put a nofollow on all of them. Maybe it's a sign-in page. If you're Expedia.com, they have a nofollow on My Itineraries, which makes perfect sense, right? Why would you want Googlebot to crawl into itineraries? Because that's a personalized kind of thing. But inevitably, somebody links to that page, or you forget and you don't have every single link with a nofollow. And so it's very common that, I'll just draw a very simple example. So suppose we have a page A, and we have a no-followed link to page B. Well, we won't follow that link. We drop it out of our link graph. We just drop it completely. So we won't discover page B because of this link. But now, suppose there's some other guy on page C, and he does link to page B. Well, we might follow that link, and as a result, end up indexing B. So you can try to make sure that every link to a page is no-followed, but it's sometimes hard to make sure that every single one is correctly handled. And so this, like noindex, does have these weird corner cases where you could very easily see a page get crawled just because not every single link was no-followed. In the noindex case, it could happen because we hadn't actually gotten around to crawling that page, and so we didn't see the noindex meta tag. So let's move on to another really powerful way. I helped a friend use this whenever her forum got spammed by porn spammers recently, and that's the URL removal tool. So Htaccess is great as a preventative measure. You've put a password on it, nobody can guess what it is, no search engine's going to get in there, it won't get indexed. The other thing you can use, if you do let the search engines in and then you want to take it out later, is our URL removal tool. We've offered the URL removal tool for at least 5 years, probably more. And for a long time, it sat on like services.google.com, and it was completely self-service. It would run 24/7. But just recently, the Webmaster Console team has integrated the URL removal tool into the Webmaster Console. And so it's much, much simpler to use. The UI is much better. The way that it used to work is it would remove the URL for 6 months. And if that was a mistake, like suppose you removed your entire domain and you didn't really mean to, then you'd have to email Google's user support and say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to obliterate my entire site. Can you revoke that? And someone at Google would have to do that. Now you can do that yourself. And so it's very powerful, but it also gives you a safety net, because at any time you can go in and you can say, oh, I didn't mean to remove my entire site, revoke that request. And that gets revoked very quickly. So to use the Google Webmaster Console, it's not that hard to prove that you own a site. You can either make a little page on the root of the directory, the root of your domain, to say, yep, this is me. Or you can even update a simple meta tag and say, yep, here's a little signature to prove that it's my site. Once you've proven, yeah, this is my domain, then we give you a lot more stats and this wonderful little URL removal tool. It can remove at a very nice level of granularity. You can remove the whole domain. You can remove just a subdirectory. I think you can even remove just individual URLs. And we show you the status the whole time. We'll show you all the pending requests that you've done. And so it's pending until it's gone live. And then once it's live, that'll turn into a revoke. And you can say, you know what? I've gotten all those social security numbers or credit card numbers or whatever down, so revoke that, and now it's safe to start crawling again. So of the ways to remove or prevent your URLs from showing up in Google, there's a lot of different options. Some of them are very strong, robots.txt, the no-index meta tag, but they do have these weird corner cases where we might show the reference to the URL in various situations. So the ones that I definitely recommend are Htaccess. That will prevent people from getting in the first place. And at least for Google, the URL removal tool. So if you've gotten URLs crawled that you don't want crawled, you can still get them out and get them out relatively quickly. All right, thanks very much, and I hope that was helpful.